Good to go. All right. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this evening's virtual community conversation on the capital budget. Let me first give some special thanks to all of the department leaders who are here with us today and have put in so much work on the administration side. So I want to thank Mayor Ginther as well as our finance director, Kathy Owens, for all of her hard work as well. Also want to thank our area commissioners and civic association leaders for helping to circulate input forms, and of course, all our residents who are joining us today, either via WebEx or if you're watching on our YouTube or Facebook channels. The purpose of this hearing is to present the city's capital improvement budget and capital improvement plan to the residents. Tonight's conversation is the last public meeting in a series of 3 public conversations on this topic. There were 2 in-person opportunities to engage, as well as before these public conversations and public meetings, many months of engagement with our area commissions, as well as a public online input form that folks were able to submit their requests, as well as give input and feedback as to what should be reflected in both this year's capital budget and the capital improvements plan. Capital projects we're discussing tonight concern physical assets here in the city. So that's our roads, our waterways, recreation and parks, all physical infrastructure. And while we know that those pieces of infrastructure lend itself to our operating budget as well as programmatic, tonight's discussion will focus around those hard infrastructure physical assets. And we understand how important these infrastructure improvements are, investments are to our city. And that is why it is a longstanding tradition of the city of Columbus to set aside a quarter of every dollar collected in city income tax for capital projects. This funding structure ensures that the city is able to consistently put out these budgets every single year. The city's AAA bond rating ensures that the city can borrow money at a low interest rate as a result. This saves Columbus and our taxpayers millions upon millions of dollars every year through these lower interest rates. That said, these capital investments are no good unless they meet the needs of residents. So we're here today to hear input from residents on what matters in their communities, but also to provide a lay of the land as to what the work of this administration has been doing and what they are proposing to council. Council's community engagement team held a 2-month-long community engagement process for the capital budget. The city held 4 bus tours, east, west, north, and south, in conjunction with our area commissions and other civic associations. Bus tours, 4, which were 2.5 hours long bus tours, total 10 hours of us as council members, along with other parts of the other folks in the administration, physically going out and seeing the concerns of our community leaders. 49 responses to the public survey, 21 responses from area commissions from the area commission survey that was sent out. And we also collected 125 capital eligible projects that were requested in total from those surveys and input. If you would like to share your input tonight, please use the hand raise system in WebEx, and we will get to your question as soon as we can. We will begin this hearing with presentations from each department. Each department will share their capital budget allocation and projects that we will be happening around and in your neighborhoods. After each presentation, council will have the opportunity to ask the department's questions. And you'll see some departments have organized their submissions around citywide projects, while others have split their requests into north and south halves of the city. After we've gone through each department, we will then take any final questions from council and hear public testimony. Depending on the specificity of any question raised by residents. Either I or the department head will be able to respond to each question. I do want to make sure I level set with the community that folks that are represented here from each department are specifically here to talk about the capital budget, and that is really their area of expertise in the department. So if there is a programmatic or a social type of issue that you may have, we will do our best to answer it, but we will take it down and make sure that we follow up with you. But tonight's discussion, again, is centered around physical infrastructure and the capital budget, not our operating budget. The capital budget you'll hear about tonight is a proposed budget. It is not the final. It is through these public input processes, as well as the 2-month process that was led by our community engagement team and other community conversations, that will arrive at the final product that council will vote on here in the coming month. With us tonight, I'll just go through who we have. We have Chris Long from our finance department, Ms. Erin Prosser with the Department of Development, Dan Jayangardella from the Department of Public Safety, Steve Wenzel from the Department of Public Service and Transportation, Jonathan Lee from the Department of Utilities, and Steve Highland from the Recreation and Parks Department. At this time, we are going to go right into our department presentations. Just want to pause to see if I see any of my other colleagues, if they want to have comments, and I don't see any. So with that, we will go straight into our finance, Department of Finance's presentation, and I'll kick it over to Mr. Long.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bankston, Council President Hardin, members of council, for your time and consideration of Mayor Ginther's proposed 2023 capital improvement budget. I would also like to thank members of the community who are here this evening. We certainly value your input and advocacy on the part of your respective neighborhood. We certainly appreciate all of your ideas. Tonight, you'll be hearing from members of the mayor's administration. I am presenting on behalf of the Department of Finance, on behalf of Director Kathy Owens. I'll be providing just a general high-level overview of the mayor's proposed 2023 capital improvement budget, how it was formulated, its composition from a very high level, and then be kicking that over to the other departments for sort of a deeper dive into their respective areas. Next slide, please. So the city actually has two main budget cycles, annual budget cycles, that is operating and capital. Operating funds, what we like to say, is the daily operations of the city. Think personnel, supplies, and services that go into providing the services to city residents that you see every day. The trash collection, public safety operations, our utilities operations, our refuse operations. So just the daily operations of the city. That's not obviously the focus of tonight's conversation, but I think it's worth pointing out the differences between the two different budget cycles. Our operating budget is funded largely through income tax collection. So the city's 2.5% income tax funds about 80% of the operating budget. It's also funded by some other sources, including enterprise fund revenues and property taxes. Next slide, please. What is the focus, obviously, of tonight's public hearing is the capital budget. And if the operating budget is what happens in terms of city services, the capital really dictates where those city functions happen. As Vice Chair Bankston mentioned, it's the infrastructure. It's the physical locations that city operations take place. Big things that come to mind right away are our roads, our sidewalks, our recreation facilities, our public safety facilities, park improvements, and our water and sewer infrastructure. As Vice Chair Bankston also mentioned, the city's capital improvement budget actually happens in two different segments. There's our capital improvement program, which is actually a 6-year budget cycle from 2023 to 2028. And the first year of that capital improvement program is what is being proposed by Mayor Ginther, which is the capital improvement budget for 2023. So if you don't see something in tonight's capital budget proposal It doesn't mean that it's not in the city's capital improvement program. We can only budget 1 year at a time due to the fiscal realities that the city faces. And so it's important to look at the 6-year program, as there are initiatives that may not be funded in the initial year, but could be in one of the subsequent years. The capital budget is funded with a 25% set aside from the city's income tax revenues. So 25 cents on every dollar of income tax that comes into the city is placed into a special reserve fund called the Special Income Tax Fund. And it's those dollars that are used to support the capital budget of the city in conjunction with what we call enterprise fund revenues, which are actually payments made by city residents for their utility services. So that combination of special income tax revenues and water and sewer enterprise revenues go to fund the mayor's capital budget. Next slide, please. Capital budget development. This is just a general overview. How does the mayor's capital budget come together? So city departments, many of which you'll hear from tonight, have their own individual outreach and engagement activities where they collect ideas and projects from residents for different capital requests. Those capital requests are submitted to the finance department, and we compile those requests and we determine funding capacity for the city for any given year. We present those to the mayor. The mayor obviously determines priorities and makes a final determination as to what should go into his proposed capital improvement budget and capital improvement program. And then that program is provided to city council for their time and consideration, which is currently underway. We then move to public hearings. We're obviously in one tonight, and then we're hopeful for adoption by city council here in the next month or so. What follows this whole process is a bond sale. We at the city do need to provide bond sale proceeds after the adoption of the capital improvement budget. Those are the actual proceeds that fund individual projects. That's somewhere usually 6 to 8 months after the adoption of the budget. Next slide, please. The slide you see before you here is a 9-month history of the city's capital improvement budgets, going all the way back to 2015. In 2015, we were a little less than $1 billion annually. That has grown to $1.7 billion, which is in the mayor's proposed 2023 capital improvement budget. We owe that all to the residents of the city of Columbus. We're blessed to live in an economically prosperous area of the country and of the state, and it's the growth and resiliency of our communities that have provided those resources. You'll notice that the bar chart here has different colors associated with it, a red and a blue. Red indicates carryover. These are dollars that weren't spent in a prior fiscal year that carry over to a subsequent fiscal year, and council must approve those carryover proceeds each year. The blue is new projects. This is new funding that's brought to the table each year to provide funding for brand new projects and programs around the city. So you'll see that final column there under 2023. The mayor's proposed 2023 capital budget is a little over $1.7 billion. Next slide, please. My final slide for this evening just gives another breakdown of the 2023 capital improvement budget. You'll notice again, there's 3 different areas here that are color coded. This just indicates where are we getting the dollars to fund this $1.7 billion. The red area, which is the largest portion, these are those enterprise fund revenues that we mentioned earlier. These are dollars that come into the city from utility bill payments by city residents. So about $960 million of the $1.7 billion will be supported by enterprise fund revenues. The light blue section, $722 million. These are SIT supported portion. And this would be from that 25% set aside from income tax collections. And then finally, that little sliver, $47 million, is from internal service funds that bill other city departments for revenue. So that collectively is our capital budget. And I want to thank Vice Chair Bankston and again, Council President Hardin and all council members for their time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director Long. Just one question. I think that the finance team as well as our auditor work hand in hand. If you could just give a high level, how we get to determining that capacity, because as you pointed, it changes from year to year, and right is directly related to the city's overall financial well-being. So if you could just give a high level as to ensuring residents that we're coming to that number based off of sound reasoning, and our ability to pay. So if you could just highlight that a little bit for us.
Happy to, Vice Chair Bankston. So each year, we in finance are in really constant communication with Auditor Kilgore and her team. Auditor Kilgore provides us with guidance and information about what the projections are for city income tax revenues. And so when she comes out each year with her official revenue estimate, and we keep in constant communication with her throughout the capital budget development to ensure that what we're projecting on the finance side of the ledger, if you will, is consistent with Auditor Kilgore's overview of what income tax collections are. We never want to be in a position of presenting a capital budget to the mayor or to city council that we think cannot be supported by income tax revenues. So we always ensure that we are in lockstep with the auditor on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. And so now you heard from finance on how. Now we're excited to get into really some of, I think, the high level overview projects. Of course, we won't go line by line in the capital budget, but want to highlight some of our larger projects. And first up is our Department of Development. And we have our housing czar with us, Ms. Erin Prosser, and I will kick it over to her.
Councilmember Bankston, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to share with you the 2023 Department of Development capital budget request. The reason I'm here with you tonight is because 71% of our budget proposal will go to support the development and preservation of affordable housing in our city. With the passage of the 2022 Affordable Housing Bond, our department is able to more than double the amount of funding for affordable housing projects from last year. This critical infusion of resources comes at a time when many of our families are feeling the impacts of their housing scarcity and seeing their housing costs rise and the challenge of securing affordable, safe, and stable housing becoming more and more challenging. Our total capital budget request is $70,850,000. Within that is $50 million for affordable housing, $9.75 million for community development initiatives, $10.75 million for economic development projects, and $350,000 for human services capital projects, including emergency shelter repair. Next slide, please. A budget reflects our priorities, and with more than 71% of this year's capital budget request going to support affordable housing, it is clearly the top priority for our city and the Department of Development. The investments included in this capital budget request are based on the guiding principles of the Columbus Housing Strategy, which was announced last year. The capital budget proposal was developed with the goal of ensuring that families in the city of Columbus don't pay more than 30% of their income to live in the neighborhood of their choice. The budget also reflects the learned outcomes from the 2019 $50 million bond package, which created more than 1,300 new units of affordable housing in our city, brought those units online twice as fast, and leveraged more than $300 million in additional public and private money. In November of last year, the Columbus voters approved the sale of up to $200 million in bonds to support affordable housing in our city, and this 2023 capital budget request includes the allocation of the first $50 million of the newly approved bond package. Next slide, please. Unlike the other departments that identify, bid, and execute capital projects like roadway improvements and new facilities in our parks, our investments rely on partners in the community who bring new affordable housing, manage our shelter system, and bring new job opportunities to the city of Columbus. The proposed investments with these partners in our city are $20 million to support affordable housing, both new and rehabbed units in our city. $11.5 million to support and expand home ownership opportunities throughout the city, $13 million for the preservation of affordability, and $5 million to support our housing and shelter our most vulnerable. Next slide, please. In addition, the request includes $7 million for Short North infrastructure improvements, $2 million for Rickenbacker right-of-way improvements to support the increased airport capacity, and $2.5 million to support strategic acquisitions around the city. Next slide, please. Finally, looking ahead to the capital improvement program for the next few years, the development department will continue to focus our investments to bring affordable housing into our city and support our most vulnerable residents. The remaining $150 million of the 2022 affordable housing bond dollars will be allocated based on the principles of the Columbus Housing Strategy and on the needs of our families to continue to bring new affordable rental units, new affordable home ownership opportunities, preserve the existing affordability in our neighborhoods, and provide supportive housing for those that need it. Councilmember Bankston, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you the Department of Development proposed 2023 capital budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Aaron. One thing I just want to highlight for folks is that $200 million bond package is directly because of the voters who stood up and said that affordable housing matters to them. If you can just talk about our strategy around that, because folks hear that number and it may seem like a big number, but when you're talking about construction of units, it's not so big. And so just talk about our philosophy of how we want to leverage that really more or less to fill holes and make sure that we get as many units as possible, especially in that construct category.
Correct. It is a really significant investment that our community is going to make in affordable housing, and we want to make sure that those dollars go as far as possible to provide as many units as possible into the community. And we do that by pairing it with other public and private funding sources that our partners bring to the table and other governments are also providing. So certainly the use of the low-income housing tax credit program is one that provides a really strong support for the projects, but because the projects still require more investment and more support, our friends at Franklin County have the Franklin County Magnet Fund, and then we can put our dollars into the project to really get it across the finish line. Again, it is really a great way to leverage those other resources to bring those projects into the community. And when those public dollars go into that project, they are not just less expensive units, but they are income restricted and protected, which means that the units go to families within those income brackets, and they are provided safe and stable housing in those units where they can continue to live. And I think that's a really important part of it. We're also looking really strongly at how we can support our most vulnerable. And really how we can utilize some of those dollars to fill the gaps that our other partners in the public sector may not have funding for. Most specifically transitional housing for those experiencing homelessness. There is a little bit of a gap in our ability to support some of those folks and families, and the opportunity to use bond package funds to fill that gap is really critical and important, and kind of fills in a portion of what's really needed for our most vulnerable in the community.
Thank you for that clarification. And just as a recap and reminder for folks, can you remind us the number of units that were leveraged in the first bond package, which was only 50 million, but I think it's impressive numbers there.
Yes, with the 50 million, the outcome was about 1,300 new units of affordable housing, again, income restricted and protected in the city of Columbus. Those projects are either online or on their way to being part of our neighborhoods. And then we can continue that really incredible effort with the $200 million bond package and our partners out in the affordable housing community.
Thank you again for all the work that you're doing around housing. We know that development is not simply about bringing new jobs and revenue to the city, but it's also make sure we're investing in the places that folks call home. So thank you, Ms. Aaron. Next, we have public safety. You know, this is top of mind for folks. Again, just want to reiterate that we are talking about the capital side of our public safety department. So the physical assets and infrastructure that deal with safety. So that covers, of course, both fire, police, and EMS. And so want to kick it over to Dan Jayangardella, who is here with the Department of Public Safety. Dan?
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston, and members of the community. On behalf of Safety Director Kate Pichotti, I want to thank you for allowing me to present some information regarding the Public Safety 2023 capital budget. Next slide. So unlike the operating budget, which public safety probably is, all about 65%. The general fund budget of I think the 6 presentations, the 6 departments, will probably have the smallest allocation for the capital side. I'm sure my colleagues on the call tonight are appreciative of that. So for the capital budget, we propose about $54 million in new funding and approximately $20.5 million in carryover funds. Next slide, please. The department is focused on the mayor's priorities of protecting Columbus neighborhoods by designing and constructing new police and fire facilities, procuring new fire apparatus, and various improvements to other public safety facilities. These investments provide safe and efficient facilities and vehicles for public safety employees who provide essential services as well as protect the lives and property of Columbus residents. Next slide, please. So with respect to investments in the northern part of the city, there's a major capital expenditure proposed to be made at the Carolyn Piedmont Avenue property, where the city will construct a real-time crime center, a new 911 emergency call center, and an emergency operations center, as well as a new police substation. This would be Police Substation 2 that's presently located just a short distance away on Parkwood Avenue. In fact, a demolition contract has already been legislated to tear down the existing properties at Carolyn Piedmont Avenue. And we anticipate an architectural design contract will hopefully will present to council yet this summer in order to enter into design for the real-time crime center and the rest of the facilities associated with this property. There's approximately $10 million in carryover funds that are available for not only the demolition, but also the design that are left over from the 2022 capital budget. And in addition to that, there's $5 million proposed in the 2023 capital budget so that the police division can incorporate a crime gun intelligence center into this real-time crime property facility. We also, on the northern end of the city, will have Fire Station 36, which is currently in design for the location of Central College and Harlem Roads on the far northeast portion of the city. There's $15 million proposed in new funding for the fire station, along with design funds that are available to construct this fire station on property that was previously acquired by the city. Public Safety anticipates construction on this fire station to commence in the spring of 2024 with completion at the end of 2025. Next slide, please. With respect to projects on the south side of Columbus, we have new funding of $9 million proposed to resurface the vehicle storage area at the city's impound lot, which is at 2700 Impound Road, just south of State Route 104 at the Hall Road exit. Originally, when this impound lot was constructed, it was mostly a gravel lot, and we have a significant need to resurface a good deal of that to provide for a safety area to store our vehicles. That, along with additional funds that were of $6 million that are carryover, gives us about $15 million in total to complete this project. We also have $4 million in capital funds proposed to relocate the storage and the training areas for the fire bomb units. We have 2 fire bomb units that we have in the Division of Fire. Their present facility will no longer be available in the near future. So therefore, these funds are needed to identify a location, a design, and then of course begin construction of a new facility. We also have as well approximately $4.6 million in carryover funds, as well as $8 million in new funding to construct Police Substation 19 on Sullivan Avenue. Land was acquired in 2022. A design contract, I believe, was just pending before council to initiate the design of this substation. The current substation, which is also on Sullivan Avenue, it is old, it's small, it lacks areas for community to engage directly with police. So we anticipate a groundbreaking for a new facility sometime in 2024. Next slide, please. With respect to some citywide projects, we have $10 million proposed to purchase fire apparatus. This, of course, would be ladder trucks, engines, heavy rescue vehicles, EMS response vehicles. Clearly, these vehicles get a lot of use in our city, and we have a consistent need for funding and for these type of vehicles. Again, these vehicles could be assigned to any one of our 34 fire stations across the city based on replacement, et cetera. We also have in the 2023 capital budget roughly $8 million in a combination of new funds and carryover funds for general renovations and improvements for police and fire facility. The fire division has 34 fire stations. The police division has approximately 24 substations and academy buildings. And many of these facilities need general improvements. Could be things like pavement restorations, generator replacements, HVAC upgrades, et cetera. So these funds allow us to do many of those type of things. Finally, with respect to citywide projects, we also have $1.4 million in carryover funds in technology. This will be used to upgrade our city's 911 phone system. The phone system handles about 600,000 incoming calls each year. And of course, periodically we need to upgrade the hardware and software, and this will enable us to maintain an effective operating system. With respect to, next slide, please. With respect to the capital improvements program, the 5-year out program, we anticipate next year upwards of $40 million to construct the real-time crime center and the public safety operations campus that I referred to earlier. It's Carolyn and Piedmont Avenue. Again, we're hoping to be in design this year, and then we look forward to bidding for construction next year, and hopefully funds will be provided in the 2024 capital budget for that. And then again, we also anticipate further funding for fire apparatus, a minimum of $6 million, and about $3.5 million for, again, general renovations to our facilities. With respect to longer term projects, of course, we always look forward to being able to replace fire stations and police substations. And I'm sure based on what Director Long had talked about earlier, when looking at the financials across the plan, we certainly would hope to anticipate receiving funds in later years to indeed build some of these structures. So next slide. So basically, there's just some examples of our latest police substation to far north, and then there's a couple other slides on fire apparatus that we purchased, and then also the fire station on Green Lawn Avenue as well. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy, Councilmember Bankston, to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Director. One question, and well, it might be a question, more or less a comment, but really excited to see in the Hilltop in particular that new substation, part of the Envision Hilltop plan, which was something that directly came from our residents. If you could just talk about those facilities and more of our safety facilities, our philosophy of them not just being, I think, places where our officers go to report to and work out of, but really how they become an asset to the community.
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston. I believe that Police Chief Bryan has a new vision for what our police substations should look like in the future, wanting to push more officers out into the community. So this will be the first opportunity under Chief Bryan for us to design a new police substation. And as I had mentioned earlier, and you referenced, the current substation on, I think it's at 2700 Sullivan Avenue, was likely built in the late 50s, early 1960s, and it really didn't anticipate the kind of community policing and the type of services that and interaction with the community that certainly we are pushing for these days. So we're very much looking forward. We have a very good footprint in terms of land. We have a very sizable footprint that will enable us, I think, to do those kinds of things, to have more officers out in the community and to be much more engaged with them as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and just also on that note, thinking about proactive policing and better utilizing technology, if you could just high level talk about the real-time crime center. I know this has been in the works for a while, and a lot of great work has been done by yourself and public safety around that. So if you could just talk about our hopes and goals with that facility, but more or less that technology.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Bankston. As you know, technology has evolved tremendously, even in the last 5 years. We've already on our second upgrade of body-worn cameras and in-car cameras. That combined with some of the other technologies that the mayor and public safety put in place, like ShotSpotter, license plate reader cameras. Of course, for about 10 years now, we've had neighborhood cameras in our community. I think we're pushing about 300 of those. And then there's also an ability for even business and private cameras to be tied technologically with our camera system. So the Real-Time Crime Center will bring those type of technologies together, as well as a variety of other technology and softwares where crime analysts can look at data and be a little bit more predictive about areas where we might see hotspots or crime, and also provide much more immediate and timely information to our officers and the public in the community when we're obviously looking to suppress gun violence and the other things that are going on. So thank you.
I thank you again for all of your work in public safety. And Dan knows this, that when I first started as a staffer at the city, he was in finance. So this is not his first capital budget rodeo. So thank you for not just only this capital budget, but all the ones that you've worked on in the past for the city. Next, we have our public service department, public service and transportation. And we have Steve Wenzel with us who will lead us through that. Steve?
Good afternoon, Councilmember Bankston, members of council, and members of the community. First off, thank you for this opportunity to briefly speak about the Department of Public Services proposed 2023 capital budget. So with that, let's jump right into the first slide. The Department of Public Services proposed 2023 capital improvements budget totals $301.9 million this year. That's made up of $131.1 million in new funding and $170.8 million in carryover funding that will invest in roadways, sidewalks, bikeways, bridges, and other projects that will improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. Next slide, please. As in most years, the centerpiece of Public Services proposed capital budget is $36.9 million in new funding for the city's resurfacing program. The Department of Public Service maintains approximately 5,700 lane miles of city roadways. The resurfacing program mills the existing pavement and replaces it with new asphalt, performs partial and full depth pavement repairs, ADA ramp upgrades, curb repair, and pavement markings. This year, there will be 3 major resurfacing projects totaling $31.1 million. With these projects, the department plans to resurface over 180 streets and construct almost 700 ADA curb ramps across the city. The department also plans to spend another $1.5 million on crack sealing and slurry sealing 278 of our city streets across the city. Some of these streets, or a sample, just a small sample of streets that we will be resurfacing as a part of these projects, include Schwartz Road from Winchester Pike to State Route 33, Williams Road from High Street to Parsons, Aberdeen Avenue from Atwood Terrace to McGuffey Road, Trayview Road from Builders Place to Lakeshore Drive. Next slide, please. Included in this year's capital budget is new funding in the amount of $3.4 million for our bridge rehab program. The type of work typically performed on bridges includes patching of concrete surfaces, micro resurfacing, painting, replacement of expansion joints and seals, and crack sealing. Next slide, please. Also included in the 2023 capital improvements budget is $18 million associated with Link Us. Link Us is Central Ohio's comprehensive mobility initiative aimed at addressing growth, affordability, and opportunity gaps within our community by making significant investments in transit, sidewalks, bikeways, trails, and roadway improvements. One of the key projects within the Link Us initiative is the Northwest Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT corridor, which has been allocated $4.0 million in 2023 capital improvements budget. An additional $2 million has been requested for the corridor's design completion in the fiscal year 2025 Capital Improvements Plan or Capital Improvements Program. The remaining $14 million of the allocated budget will contribute to advancing multiple projects that improve transit and pedestrian access along the Northwest Corridor. Additionally, these funds will facilitate the ongoing design efforts for the West Broad Street and East Main Street bus rapid transit corridors. Next slide, please. Also included with this proposed budget are other investments that we're making across the city. This budget proposal also includes $1.3 million in new funding and carryover funding, which is leveraging another $5.1 million in grant funding from the Ohio Department of Transportation and the Ohio Public Works Commission for the intersection improvements at Broad and James. The project consists of widening James Road both north and south of Broad Street to construct left and right turn lanes. Other improvements include replacing the traffic signal, relocating city power poles and power lines, as well as constructing a concrete median, asphalt pavement, curb and gutter, storm sewer, curb ramps, and pavement markings. The 2023 budget proposal includes $830,000 in new and carryover funding for the intersection improvements Georgesville and Hall Road project, which is leveraging over $1 million in grant funding from the Ohio Department of Transportation Safety Funds. This project includes improvements to the traffic signal at Georgesville and Hall intersection, along with the addition of right turn lanes in the southbound and eastbound directions, a shared use path along the south side of Hall Road from Georgesville to Dura Road. Another project included in the budget proposal is design funds associated with the roadway improvements State Route 161, Bush Boulevard to Ambleside Drive project at $1.7 million. This project involves improvements to the intersections of State Route 161 and Bush Boulevard, Ambleside Drive, and Satinwood Drive. These improvements will include the addition of pedestrian and bicycle facilities from Bush Boulevard to Ambleside Drive, new traffic signals, pavement widening, and resurfacing, raised medians on the side streets, and the installation of mini roundabouts on the side streets also. The 2023 budget request includes roadway improvements Williams Road project. This project will develop a corridor plan for Williams Road corridor and an emphasis on improving the corridor as an effective multimodal freight corridor. The limits of the corridor plan starts on Williams Road from the western terminus, which is the Scioto River, and extend to its eastern terminus at Hamilton Road or State Route 317. The corridor plan will also include the corridor's intersection improvements at High Street and Williams Road, Allen Creek at Williams, and Hamilton at Williams. Change slide, please. This budget proposal includes $325,000 in new and carryover funding, which is leveraging over $1 million in grant funding from the Ohio Department of Transportation Safety Improvement Funds for the intersection improvements at Cleveland, 5th to Leonard. This project, which supports the Walk Safe on Cleveland initiative and aligns Vision Zero Columbus principles, consists of pedestrian improvements at 7 intersections along Cleveland Avenue, which include Camden Avenue, East 19th Avenue, Kenmore Road, Republic Avenue, Lakeview Avenue, Agler Road, and Leonard Road. Improvements consist of installation of enhanced crosswalk markings, the installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacons or pedestrian hybrid beacons at each intersection, and a replacement of non-ADA compliant curb ramps. Also, another mobility initiative we will be working on this year is $65,000 for the installation of a flashing pedestrian crosswalk near the intersection of Obetz and South Point Boulevard. Change slide, please. This 2023 capital budget proposal includes $15 million in mobility safety improvements. Included in the mobility funds is construction funding in the amount of $2.07 million to install sidewalk to fill in gaps along both sides of Courtright Road. This will go from Groves Road to Refugee Road. We will also upgrade the curb and storm sewer across the corridor as needed. The 2023 budget also includes $800,000 in design costs for the PED Safety 17th Avenue project. This project involves the replacement of curb and sidewalk along 17th Avenue from I-71 to Billeter Boulevard. These improvements include signal replacement and installation of bump outs. The 2023 budget proposal includes $200,000 in construction costs, also leveraging $2 million in CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant funds, for the Pedestrian Safety Hiawatha Park Drive project. This project consists of design of pedestrian and bikeway improvements along Hiawatha Drive from Silver Drive or Velma Avenue, south of I-71 to East Hudson Street. The SUP will be added along the east side of Hiawatha Park Drive for the full project limits, and then we'll also install sidewalks along the west side of Hiawatha Park Drive in any location that doesn't have existing sidewalks currently. This includes $1 million in design. This budget includes $1 million in design and right-of-way funding for the Pedestrian Safety Marion Franklin Sidewalk Project. This project involves installation of sidewalks on Mound View Avenue, Audubon Avenue, and Clarefield Avenue from Groveport Road to Fairwood Avenue. This proposed budget also includes $700,000 in design funding for the Sullivan Avenue Bikeway project. This project involves the construction of a shared use path and pedestrian facilities along Sullivan Avenue from Georgesville to South Wilson Road. Next slide, please. The 2023 capital improvements budget also includes $6 million for the refuse collection vehicles and containers to replace and update the division's fleet that service over 346,000 households every week. Some of this equipment will be dedicated to support the Clean Neighborhoods Initiative to address the persistent problem of illegal dumping in our neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Lastly, looking ahead at our priorities in the capital improvements program, or the capital improvements plan from 2024 to 2028, we will be continuing our investment in our Vision Zero initiative at roughly $5.3 million each year, or $26.5 million over the 5-year period. We'll also continue investing $20 million a year in resurfacing dollars, amounting to $100 million over that 5-year period also. We'll be continuing with the mobility funding at $6 million per year, $30 million total over the capital improvements plan, as well as continuing our bridge rehab program at $3.4 million per year, or $17 million over that capital improvements program plan years. Again, I would like to thank council and the community for the opportunity to present Public Services proposed 2023 capital improvements budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Steve, and a lot of work going on. Just so we level set, so folks understand, how many miles of roadway are we looking at in the city of Columbus?
So when we kind of look at it, council member, when we kind of look at it, we look at it in terms of lane miles. So when you think of our roadways, we look at 5,700 lane miles. So we're talking about like a 2-lane road. Going one direction is considered a lane mile, as well as coming the other direction is another lane mile. So when we look at it, we're looking at roughly 5,700 across basically almost 400 square miles in the city of Columbus.
Yeah, and I always like to put that in perspective when you think about, how many roadways we have to maintain, as well as the city's growth construct as well across, 223 square miles of the city. Thinking about resurfacing, how long, when we say we resurface a road, what's the lifespan of that resurfacing?
Thank you, Councilmember Bankston. What we typically see, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. Of course, the amount of traffic that street gets, and if it's an arterial, collector, or residential road. But on average, across our whole system, we like to get between 15 and 20 years out of our existing resurfacing that we do. So all the streets that we resurfaced this year, the 200 and some streets that I mentioned, we'll look to get at least 10 to 15 years out of that streets. Sometimes, if they're less traveled streets, they might go up to 20 years.
Gotcha. And then last, just thinking about, and you answered a little bit, kind of how do we prioritize resurfacing, and then also thinking about sidewalks, knowing that as new development goes in, it's much easier to get those in now. But also, what is our prioritization or philosophy around sidewalk installations as well as resurfacing?
Yeah, thank you, council member. So what we'll do when we're looking at the prioritization for street resurfacing, we're first going to look at the pavement condition. So you'll hear a lot a lot of times us say that we look at the PCN number of the street, or what is the PCN number? It's a ranking of the pavement management condition of that street. It's a factor anywhere from 0 to 100. So if you're looking at a street that has a 30, then that's going to be one of our worst streets. Where one that's an 80 or 90 might be one that we just recently resurfaced. So we take that in consideration. We look at the PCN numbers as just one of the factors. We also look at traffic, like I mentioned, where if that road gets more traffic than, say, a residential road, it might slip up a little bit higher priority. If you're talking like a major arterial road or major collector road, it might get a little bit higher priority because that has more traffic than necessarily a residential road. But we try to hit all of them across the board, a good mixture. And we take input from our street maintenance crews. So these are the guys that are out in the streets every day, what we call the boot. They have boots in the streets, or they're out there seeing, how many potholes is that street getting, or how much cracks and sealant do they have to put on to maintain the street. So we take a lot of input from them. And of course, we definitely take input through the public. So call 311, let us know that the street needs a look at. There's a lot of potholes on it, and we'll go out and we'll investigate that street and we'll determine where it needs to be on the list. And then, like I mentioned, we try to get, 15, 20 years out of our resurfacing. So we look at when it was last resurfaced, and then we try to distribute it around the city. So a lot of these packages that you hear me talk about, package one might concentrate on the north and the east side, because that's where we get better pricing from our contractors, because they're not moving around the city all the time. So we'll have them concentrate in that area, and then package two might be the south and the west, or we kind of split it up that way and group it and bundle it that way. We look at other projects, so we don't want to go in and resurface the street knowing that our colleagues over in the Department of Utilities are going to put a water line in a year, so they'll be ripping up the street. So we'll kind of work around some of these conflicts that we establish when we're looking at resurfacing. And then last, of course, is funding level. We get anywhere between say $20 and $40 million a year, and that kind of determines how many streets we can get done. As far as pedestrian safety, we will look at 311. So if you see something that's going on with one of the sidewalks, or you want to have sidewalks installed, call 311. We'll get it logged into our database. Since 2005, just kind of put it in perspective, we've received over 1,700 sidewalk requests. We normally get around $6 million in our mobility funds. So as you can imagine, the need outweighs the dollar amounts available. But this year, I think we're bumping that up a lot. I mentioned $15 million. So we're really trying to tackle and make a good dent in those. If you can imagine, 50% of Columbus streets don't have sidewalks. So we need to kind of force some investment to get some of these sidewalks out there and get some of them both repaired and installed. And then you mentioned like some of the site development. So we require people that are putting in developments, say they're putting in a new residential development, that they include sidewalks as a part of that development. And we also look at working with our development department to use maybe URF or urban infrastructure recovery funds to install new sidewalks. So, and we look at other capital projects that we're doing, like if we're doing a major street repair, State Route 161, we make sure that we're putting sidewalks in there as well. So a lot of several factors go into that when we're prioritizing our sidewalks and our resurfacings.
Thank you for that detailed answer and analysis. And just, I always like to make sure folks understand, again, 223 square miles and continue to be a growing city. And so continue to let us know, be our eyes and ears. Our dedicated public servants can't be on every single road. And so we rely on you. And although we may not be able to resurface or get to it in this capital budget, we have the capital improvements program, but also we're working our way to get there. So thank you again, Steve, for all of the work that you all are doing. Next, we have our Department of Utilities, and with us from Utilities is Mr. Jonathan Lee. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Bankston and members of the community. On behalf of Director Kristen Atha, I'm happy to present the Department of Public Utilities 2023 capital improvement budget. Our proposal is $218 million in proposed new funding and $205 million in ongoing carryover projects. Our proposed 2023 to 2028 capital improvement program is $4.1 billion, driven largely by growth and development in the region. As mentioned, the Department of Public Utilities services its own debt from utility bill payments, and the majority of our projects are funded from city bond fund proceeds and Ohio EPA loans. Next slide, please. Our guiding principles are to provide the community with quality water, wastewater, storm, and power services. We currently serve over 1.3 million customers in the city of Columbus and the surrounding communities. We build and maintain critical infrastructure above ground and underground to support our growing population in Central Ohio. We also ensure that we meet all EPA regulatory requirements and provide affordable rates and offer utility discount programs. Next slide, please. Some of the top projects on the north side of Columbus include new construction of our fourth water plant and transmission line, which I'll go into detail a little bit later, ongoing efforts with Blueprint Columbus, continued street lighting upgrades, stormwater improvements to mitigate flooding, and general improvements to our Dublin Road and Hapcremene treatment plants. Next slide, please. On the south side, we have several major projects planned at our Southerly Wastewater Treatment Plant. All these projects are driven by development in the region and our need to add additional sewer treatment capacity. We are beginning to design a new treatment system for $12 million in 2024 that will add an additional 110 million gallons per day to the plant. To do that expansion, we need to expand by making stormwater and floodplain improvements on site at the plant. We plan to spend $9 million on this design in 2023. Finally, we'll be turning biogas or methane into a power source through the building of a new bioenergy facility on site. This project is estimated to cost $186 million and is fast-tracked to take advantage of the federal stimulus funding through the Infrastructure Reinvestment Act. Next slide, please. Other citywide projects impacting neighborhoods and our citywide infrastructure throughout Columbus over the next few years total $1.2 billion and include several waterline projects. We have a robust program where we spend over $35 million annually on these projects, a few dam rehabilitation projects, again, Blueprint Columbus with combined north and south side funding of over $586 million over the next few years. We have over $43 million in stormwater sewer improvements in several community areas to address flooding issues, and finally over $5.6 million in streetlight projects in several community areas to provide the needed streetlights. Next slide, please. Smart street lighting is a program that will be deployed over the next 20 years or so. The Division of Power plans to do 1 to 2 phases per year depending on funding levels. Each phase costs about $3 million, and we replace around 3,500 to 4,000 lights from high-pressure sodium lights to LED lights. We are currently in construction in the Hilltop area and moving into the Livingston Avenue area. Next slide, please. This slide shows the planned construction of our fourth water plant and associated transmission line. Both the plant and the transmission line will be located in the northwest area of the region and are currently in the design phase. This project is estimated to cost $800 million and will provide additional 50 million gallons per day or 18.2 billion gallons of water per year. This new plant will help serve the development on the north and northeast side of the city and tie into our overall distribution system. Next slide, please. And finally, as mentioned previously, our Blueprint Columbus program that you may be familiar with will continue in the next several years. Our targeted completion date for this, per the EPA, is 2045. This program consists of 4 pillars: green infrastructure, roof redirection, sump pump program, and lateral lining. These combined efforts allow us to remove inflow and infiltration of rainwater into our sanitary system and helps prevent sewer overflows and prevents water and basement events. We have completed several projects in Clintonville and Linden to date. To see a blueprint project in your neighborhood, please follow the link on the screen. And you can see on the map, those highlighted green areas are all the areas that are currently part of the Blueprint Columbus program. Vice Chair Bankston, members of council, members of the community, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director Lee. And I always like to point out, especially when it comes to utilities, that a lot of this is the infrastructure that you don't see, the infrastructure that's underground, but it's critical to our growth. And as we continue to grow as a city, we have to continue to invest in that capacity to ensure that we have safe, clean drinking water, but also the sanitary systems available to accommodate that growth. So very critical to the city's infrastructure. So a lot of money, as you can see there, and a lot of time projects that for many of us we take for granted because we don't actually get to see it. So I just want to thank you and the director for all your continued work. Just to clarify for folks, I know we said it at the top of the meeting today, but just want to reiterate, how do we pay for utility projects when it comes to the bond package? Because it is different than every other department.
Councilmember Bankston, that's a great question. Utilities is a little bit unique as far as paying for our utility projects, our infrastructure projects. We use a combination of bond funding, so we do participate in the bond sale with other departments, but the lion's share of our funding is provided through the Ohio EPA loan program. That program is a great program, a great partnership we have with Ohio EPA, both on the water, sewer, and storm side. With that program, we're allowed to extend payments, principal and interest after project completion. So with that partnership, what it allows for really is it gets back to affordability. It gets back to affordable rates, allowing us to keep our rates at a lower level compared to other communities, but also make those needed infrastructure investments in the community.
Thank you for that. Just wanted to clarify. I do just want to make sure, and then I apologize because I missed some of these in real time, but there is a question here asking about PFAS levels or the MCL. And so, John, I'm not sure if you can speak to that at all, or if that's related to anything to do with the capital budget.
Yes, Councilmember Bankston, those are top of mind issues at the Department of Public Utilities. PFAS, P-F-A-S, really what that is kind of a new emerging contaminant, I guess you could say. We're constantly looking at contaminants that are entering our water supply system and how to treat them, get them out, and make sure that we've got clean and pure water that we're providing to customers. And so PFAS is something, essentially what it is, it's microplastics, to give you a very rudimentary type of definition. And so we're still at the very beginning phases of testing for PFAS and coming up with a solution at our plants to combat that. So in the capital plan that we have before us, there's nothing programmed at this point to address PFAS. There's currently nothing emergent as an emergency, I guess you could say, that we need to, but we are monitoring those levels. We're constantly testing and recording and reporting back to EPA on what we find at our water research lab. The other MCL, that's another contaminant level. Again, monitoring our water sources. We're in a watershed area here in Columbus. We have our own watershed. Some of the recent things that have happened around the state with some spills. Again, that's one situation where we're seeing, is there anything that comes over to our area? What types of chemicals and organisms are in our water supply? So our laboratory is very robust, and we're able to report back on anything and all levels to the EPA. But at this point, there's no current concern on either one of those areas.
Thank you for addressing that, and thank you, Mr. Sean Meme on YouTube, for raising that question. I see some other comments, and we'll double back to that. But what's important is that to think that when we think about utility rates, we know that they will go up, and that's how we pay for that. But it's critical infrastructure, because when we think about these new contaminants and the things that the Deputy Director just talked about, we need to make sure that we have the most up-to-date technology and facilities to address it, to ensure that we continue to have safe, clean drinking water for all of our residents and who we serve. So thank you again for that. Next up, and last but certainly not least, Recreation and Parks Department, who has been very busy in the community's past couple of years, and so really excited. I know we were just out in Linden for ribbon cutting of a brand new pool, so that's exciting. But we have Steve Hyland, who is with us from Recreation and Parks, and I will kick it over to Steve.
Great. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about the Recreation and Parks 2023 capital improvement budget. So our new funding request for 23 is $64 million. In addition, we're requesting the authority to spend another $100 million in ongoing project funding from prior years carried over into 23. And the following slides are going to demonstrate some of our major projects in design and also starting the construction phase yet this year. In addition, we're going to discuss future plans for the use of this funding authority. Next slide, please. So this funding authority is going to help take care of our many existing assets. We have 415 parks and 20 nature preserves, 8 outdoor pools and 1 indoor aquatic center, 6 golf courses, 32 community centers and facilities for arts, sports, outdoor recreation, and therapeutic recreation. And Recreation and Parks has a long-term goal to provide all residents the ability to be within a 10-minute walk of a park or a trail. Next slide, please. These top projects are for 23 and 24 in the north side of Columbus. First is the Kilbourne Run Sports Park construction. That's a soccer complex and regional tournament destination. It's also going to have playground, shelter, and trails in the northern community, with an estimated $25 million project cost. Also, Mock Park Pickleball Complex construction. It's going to be a 3-season tournament scale pickleball complex with an estimated $2.9 million construction budget. Maloney Park improvement construction. It'll include new playground and fitness stations, demolition and relocation of existing shelter, increased lighting, improved parking and traffic control. That's a $1.5 million project. Whetstone Park improvement construction. It's a renovation of a sports fields, a pond, replacement of an open air shelter, and that's an estimated $3 million for construction. Also, we're starting an indoor aquatic center design. Design phase of a new indoor aquatics and community facility in the Northeast Columbus area. That's a $5.8 million for design. Next slide, please. South side of Columbus in 23 and 24. McCoy Park development construction. It's development of a community park, outdoor pickleball courts, and therapeutic recreation-focused amenities. It's a $3.5 million project. Gender Road Park development construction. Development of a community park and pickleball and other sports. And it's $2 million for construction. Our Fran Ryan Center construction. It's a senior and arts-focused facility with an estimated construction cost of $28 million. Also, we're going to be doing improvements at the Sullivan Gardens and Beatty Recreation Center interior. Fairwood Park lighting, we're going to do lighting improvements to Fairwood Park. We're going to start the design cost, that's $20,000. Also going to be improvements to Lincoln Park with new multi-purpose sports court, a walking trail, drainage, and parking improvements. That's an estimated $75,000 for the design. And then also park and facility improvements at the Marion Franklin area. And that's going to be a $1 million improvement. Next slide, please. North side of Columbus in the years 24 through 28. West Case Park construction. That's the development of a 56-acre community park. $10 million construction cost. Tuttle Pool construction with an estimated $12 million construction cost. Phase 2 of Weststone Park, improvements to the Hollenbeck Drive entrance, construction of basketball courts with an estimated $1.1 million cost. Also, indoor aquatics facility construction. That'll be the $60 million cost to provide the indoor aquatics facility. And also the Linden Green Line design. That'll provide a 7-mile regional trail at an estimated design cost of $600,000. Next slide, please. South side of Columbus for 24 through 28. Marion Franklin Pool construction with a $10 million cost. Southwest area park acquisitions. No Bixby Park development design and construction. Deschler Park shelter design. Deschler Park will be one of several areas that will get new shelters. And Southwest area spray park design with a $250,000 design cost. Next slide, please. Recreational Parks has many ongoing priority projects citywide, and these are not specifically listed by name and location. Just to name several are tree canopy preservation and expansions, $2.85 million each year. Greenway trail surface improvements for existing citywide trail system. Facility renovations and enhancements, including lighting, HVAC, roofs, plumbing, interior finishes. Existing park improvements, security upgrades, including lighting and camera enhancements, and also many ADA improvements. Also for parkland acquisition and development, we have a goal to acquire an average of 100 acres a year as parkland reserve and to develop an average of 2 parks each year. I want to thank you again for your time. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And just wanted to let you know that one of our South Linden area commissioners, Ms. Nicole Williams, who's watching, gave you a shout out for the new pool yesterday. And so thank you, Ms. Nicole. I know you were instrumental in the One Linden planning project and seeing this come to fruition. We're really excited about it. We're hoping for some good weather here that folks can actually get out there and swim, Steve, soon.
Yes.
The only question that I have, and I know it's probably a part of our CIP, and I know it's a small portion, as we think about the city as in its growth patterns and continuing to grow, especially with spaces far west and northeast quadrants of the city. Can you just talk about, our philosophy around new facilities? I know that right now, the hard part that is trying to keep up with the growth of the city while also maintaining and replacing aging buildings. So if you could just talk about that balance and how the department comes to those determinations.
Yeah, it is a hard balance. We have 32 recreational facilities, and we have another 80 plus facilities with roofs, and we have to continually upgrade those facilities. But then we're also continue to look in the city for new investment opportunities. We do have funding for acquisition of different projects, land acquisition, and we're continually having meetings such as this and with our community groups and neighborhood associations to look for the needs throughout the city. So we continue to look for new opportunities.
Great. Thank you for that, Steve, and thanks for all the great work that you and Director Reese are doing over at Recreation and Parks. Now we've come to the public comment and speaker portion of tonight's meeting. So if you are joining us via WebEx, you can use the hand raise feature, and we will call on you to allow you to speak. There were a couple comments that we didn't get to address in the live chat that I want to make sure we go back and address. So I think Mr. Sean Meme is with us on YouTube and mentioned something around public safety and low recruitment rates and mistrust in local law enforcement. And we're continuing to build new substations instead of changing the culture and challenging gun manufacturers that flood the nation with weapons. And what I would say to that, Sean, is that, we understand that we have to continue to invest in substations. And in particular, when we were talking about the one on the hilltop, something that directly came from neighbors, something that they wanted to see in their particular neighborhood. And so always balancing what community members want to see. Additionally, I would say through some of the changes that we have made, as well as with Mayor Ginther bringing on Civilian Police Review Board, having an Inspector General, developing a new Office of Violence Prevention, all go to trying to change the culture of policing. With our new police chief, Elaine Bryant, seeing a lot more officers out on the streets, on bikes, engaging with residents is really a critical piece of that. And that takes time. Changing culture takes time. But I know that we have a council that is committed to that. I know the chair of public safety, Councilmember Remy, is committed to that. But it also is going to take working with community members to rebuild that trust and change the culture in our division of police that not only we have a challenge with here in the city of Columbus, but in police divisions all across the country. So thank you for keeping that top of mind. And last but not least, to that point, I just want to say that I think it has been clear from our mayor as well as this council that there are too many guns on the streets, and that we have a state house that has really tied our hands as a city. And so we are been calling on and will continue to call on our state legislator as well as those in Congress to pass common sense gun laws to ensure that we don't have what we see is happening on our streets every single day. So thank you for that comment. Also want to make sure that lift up the other comment on YouTube around our neighborhoods and sidewalks, and that it's unacceptable that there are neighborhoods still without sidewalks, and that finance needs to use some of this carryover money to go into the safety of our community. So two things there. Just want to clarify, the carryover dollars are already allocated to projects because some of these projects are larger projects, they're multi-year. We want to make sure that we have that money ahead of time so that the projects can get done. So when we say carryover, that's not money that's just unallocated or not spent. It's dedicated to a certain project, and just the timing of that project is not within that calendar year or fiscal year. And so it carries over into the following year to make sure we get it done. And then when it comes to the sidewalks, the blessing and curse that you heard, I think, throughout this entire hearing is growth, right? The blessing is that we continue to grow as a city, both by people and in some cases by landmass. And so with that growth means that we are, able to see the prosperity that we have as a city, but also there's pain points of trying to keep up with infrastructure. So trying to build new sidewalks in certain places that didn't never have them before. When we had an aggressive annexation policy in the 50s and 60s, we were annexing places like villages and townships that didn't require sidewalks. And so now we are both playing catch up but also trying to repair old infrastructure. And so I understand that frustration, and it absolutely, when I think about the part of the city that I live in, driving down Cassidy Avenue, to see young folks walking on the side of the road absolutely is unacceptable. But do know that it is a priority, and we are trying our best with the resources that we have to keep up with that growth. But it is one of those things that I say both is a blessing and a curse, and we want to ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep folks safe. So thank you, Mr. Meem, for engaging with us, and wanted to make sure that we addressed your comments. Any additional comments you have, please, again, use 311 or reach out to my office directly. We're happy to continue the conversation. I am looking here at my team. Doesn't look like we have any speakers that have signed up via WebEx. And so I will go to close us out. And so I just want to reiterate my thanks to the mayor and the entire administration and all the department leaders with us today for all of your hard work in putting this proposal together. Again, this is a proposed budget. It is now on council to review it, to revise it, if you will, and to come up with that final budget that we will take up later this month at Columbus City Council. If you could continue to engage with us via the city, sending us either individual emails, 311. We're always happy to take feedback as we go into the final stages of this capital budget hearing. But this sort of civic participation is essential for municipal government to operate effectively. I think many folks have heard me say it, that the challenges we face as a community are large, and it requires big, bold solutions, and every voice has to be at the table. We may not always agree on the path forward, and we may not be able to get to it immediately, but do know that you have a city that is willing to listen and that is willing to work with its residents, because I believe those big ideas don't simply come from City Hall, but it comes from the people of Columbus and us working together. So that concludes tonight's conversation, and we look forward to working with you and look forward to taking up the mayor's proposed 2023 capital budget on June 26th at City Council. Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening, and stay dry out there.